I never thought that one day, the very son I gave birth to would look at me with that look, the look of a stranger, cold, suspicious and contemptuous. Mom, did you steal it? That question fell into the brightly lit room, but inside me, everything went dark. I stood frozen, still holding the kitchen towel, a few drops of water falling onto the tile floor, each drop echoing like a nail being driven in. Michael, my son, was looking at me as if I were a thief. The house had just been robbed of all its cash and jewelry. I heard them call it a burglary. But then Camille, my daughter-in-law, collapsed onto the floor, covering her face and sobbing. Oh God, who would do such a thing? Only Mom was home. Her voice trembled, but every word cut like a blade against my skin. I saw that quick glance she threw toward Michael. Just a flicker, but enough. Mom was poor, so she got greedy, didn't she? Michael said slowly. My chest tightened, a dizziness took my breath away. Me? I managed to say, but my own voice sounded strange, hoarse. You think I took it? Who else, Mom? Camille lifted her head, her red, teary eyes gleaming, yet I saw the coldness in them. There's no sign of forced entry. Only people in the house have keys. You were here all morning. Who else could it be? Michael said nothing more. He just stepped closer, looking straight at me. That look, I'll never forget it. It wasn't the look of the son I once held in my arms. It was the look of a man forcing someone to confess. I tried to stand tall, but my knees trembled. I didn't take it. I swear on your father's grave, I didn't. Michael's fists tightened. Don't make this hard for me, Mom. If you need money, I can give you some. But to steal like this, aren't you ashamed? A sharp slap sounded like thunder. I don't remember how I fell. I just felt the burning heat on my cheek, the ringing in my ears. Michael had just hit me. The son I raised with hands that washed other people's clothes, that scraped together every meal, had just struck me because he didn't believe me. Camille jumped up, rushing to help me the way she did it, so awkward, so false. Don't, honey, please, poor Mom, but her eyes stayed fixed on me, without a trace of pity, only triumph. I heard my own breath quickening. My chest hurt not from the slap, but from the words he said next. Enough, Mom, get some rest. I'll call the police. Think about it. Maybe you just wanted to take a little, but went too far. I couldn't hear anything after that. Everything in the room blurred. I only saw the family photo on the wall, me, Michael and Camille smiling together last Christmas. I smiled. They smiled. Now every smile in that frame was a bleeding wound. He turned away, his voice hard as stone. I have to protect this family's reputation. The police will come. You should confess, it'll be easier. That sentence pierced straight through my heart. I looked at my son, the one who once promised he'd never make his mother cry, now staring at me like a criminal. Camille pretended to tremble, clutching his arm. Honey, I don't want Mom to go to jail. I just want everything to be clear. Michael nodded and took out his phone. I heard him speak to the police, each word hitting my head like a hammer. We have a suspect. It's my mother. I collapsed, my hands clutching my chest. My son, I didn't do it. I swear on your father's grave. Camille turned away, pretending to wipe her tears. I saw the corner of her lips curl slightly. So slight, yet I saw it. Moments later, when the police car pulled up in front of the house, I could barely stand. 2 officers walked in, faces stern. They looked at me, then at Michael. We received a report of theft. Please cooperate, ma'am. I lifted my head, my voice trembling. I'm innocent. I didn't take anything. One of them stepped closer and said softly, please stay calm. We just need your statement. Michael cut in, I'm the one who reported it. I confirmed the missing items belonged to my wife and me. My mother was the only one here. I looked at my son, no longer the man I raised, but a stranger entirely. A man who chose to stand with lies instead of truth. The officers took me out to the porch to take my statement. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering. "Oh my God, Mrs. Isabel got arrested. Heard she stole from her son." Those words lashed my back like a whip. I lowered my head, with no tears left to cry. After the police left, I dragged myself back to my room, each step heavy as if treading on my own heart. I wanted to scream, to shout, to smash the injustice burning inside me. But no sound came out. Only one sentence kept repeating in my mind. I didn't take it. I would never do that. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling as I opened the old wooden box where I kept some photos, a chipped wedding ring from my late husband, and the letter he wrote before he died. "If one day you feel lonely, remember, your heart is pure, don't let anyone make you forget that." I clutched the letter, tears falling onto the faded ink. In the silent room, I heard my own heartbeat, faint, but still there. They said I was poor and greedy. But I know, in this life, the only thing I never lost was my dignity. I looked at my wrinkled, calloused hands, the hands that once washed clothes, cooked meals, mended shirts to raise Michael. The hands that held him through his fevers. Those same hands, now suspected of theft. The house was filled with Camille's perfume, sweet, suffocating, strange. On the floor, Michael's shoe prints still faintly visible, leading toward the front door, the door he walked through after calling the police. I heard the engine start outside, then silence. That silence felt like a thick blanket pressing against my chest, heavy, cold. I stepped onto the porch, gazing into the still night beyond. The wind whispered through my gray hair, carrying the scent of damp earth. I wondered. Is trust the most fragile thing in the world? Can it shatter with just a word, a fake tear? But I swore to my late husband's soul and to my own conscience. I will not admit to what I didn't do. I will not let anyone turn me into a thief in my own story. I am no longer afraid. If they believe lies, then I will let the truth speak for me. Because I know one day, those who threw mud at me will be the ones to slip in it. I closed the door, the room's light flickered and died. In the darkness, I heard my own whisper, like a vow. "You may take away my trust today, Michael. But I still have my honor. And I'll keep it until my last breath." I left Michael's house the next morning, before the sun could pierce through the trees. No one saw me off. No one said a word. Only the sound of the gate closing behind me, cold, like the locking of a sentence. I clutched my small bag, a few old clothes, some loose change, and my husband's photo, and walked down the road I once took Michael to school on every morning. The morning air smelled of dust and wet grass. I didn't know where I was going, only that if I stayed, would die of humiliation. When my son's house finally disappeared behind me, I stopped, took a deep breath, and called an old taxi. "Take me to Maple Street," I said. My voice trembled, but it was firm. Going back to the old house, the one I left with pride, believing, my son's doing well, I can finally rest. Now, I return as someone cast out. The house sat tucked away in a small alley, its walls blotched and its roof covered in green moss. The wooden door creaked as I pushed it open, the musty smell rising up, familiar to the point of pain. Everything was still the same, the chipped kitchen table, the chair where I used to sit and mend my son's clothes, the wall clock still ticking steadily, the only sound reminding me that time was still moving. I set the bag down on the chair, sat heavily, my chest still stinging where Michael had hit me. The physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. I looked up at the photo of my husband that had hung on the wall for years, the glass covered in dust, but his smile still as gentle as ever. "Do you see this?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Our son," he asked me that question. He said I stole. Tears fell, but this time they made no sound. They just sank silently into my wrinkled hands. I remembered the day he died suddenly, the heart attack that took away the only man who had ever protected me. That day, I had no time to cry. I had to carry bags of laundry to wash for others, had to clean people's houses, bend down to scrub floors, hide the smell of disinfectant from the cracks in my hands. I had only one reason to endure it all, Michael. I remembered every moment clearly. That freezing night when he was 8, I came home late, exhausted, and saw him sitting on the doorstep, holding a bowl of cold soup. He smiled and said, "I saved this for you, Mom." I cried then from happiness. Because I thought that kind of love would last forever. And then, that image of the little boy faded, replaced by the man from yesterday with contempt in his eyes and bitterness in his voice. The two images overlapped, twisting in my mind like a wound that could never be stitched shut. "You married a rich woman, and I was glad you could ease some of the burden," I whispered, my voice trembling, "but I never thought wealth would blind you like this." I looked around the old kitchen, saw the cracks on the walls, the dented pan hanging crooked, the old kitchen towel I still kept. They were worthless, but at least here, no one looked at me with suspicion. Here, I was still me, a poor woman, but clean. I lit the stove, boiled water, my hands trembling. The steam rose, hazy, blurring my eyes. On the cupboard, the unfinished embroidered cloth still lay there, half of a sunflower left incomplete. I remembered stopping that day when Michael said, "Mom, stop keeping yourself busy, just rest, let me take care of things." I had believed he wanted me to live in peace. Now I understood, he only wanted me silent, standing on the edge of his life. The sound of wind in the yard pulled me back to reality. A thin, stray cat slipped through the door, meowing softly. I bent down, stroked it, the small warmth of that little creature soothed my heart a bit. "At least you don't doubt me," I murmured, my voice hoarse. In the afternoon, when sunlight slanted through the dusty window frame, I sat and looked outside. The neighborhood children were still running, shouting, playing. A neighbor woman recognized me and asked in surprise, "Mrs. Isabel? My goodness, I thought you were living with your son now." I smiled, trying to hide the lump in my throat. "I just came back to visit the old house." No one needed to know that I had been driven out. No one needed to know that my son believed I was a thief. When they turned away, the smile on my lips faded. I looked down at my hands, the green veins standing out, traces of years, of labor, of a lifetime spent worrying. Night fell. The wind swept across the tiles, carrying the damp scent of time. I sat on the porch, watching the pale moonlight spread across the brick floor, listening to the crickets. In the dim light, my shadow stretched long and thin. I knew, from this day on, there was only one path left, to keep my integrity, even if it meant going to the end. I would not cry anymore. I would not beg. I would wait, because truth always has its own voice, no matter how hard people try to bury it. I lifted my head to the sky and whispered, "My love, I will protect my dignity myself. No matter what they call me, I am still the woman you once loved, an honest one." In the stillness of the night, I thought I heard the wind answer softly, like a promise. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had touched the deepest part of pride. A poor person can lose everything except conscience. 3 days later, Michael appeared at the door of my old house. I heard the car stop in the alley, the car door slam, and then my son's figure appeared in the sunlight. He wore a white shirt, his face thin, but his eyes still carried that coldness that had killed me that day. "Mom," he said, his voice low but firm. "I need you to sign this paper. Just temporarily. So I can mortgage this house, handle some business." I stood still for a moment, looking at the paper in his hand, thick, the notary ink clear, neat to the point of being frightening. "Mortgage?" I asked softly. "Yes," he replied, avoiding my eyes. "Just borrowing for a while. When I recover the funds, I'll transfer it back to you. I promise." I knew that word, promise, no longer meant anything. But I still looked at my son, the boy I had stayed up late to mend clothes for, cook porridge for, pay school fees for, clean park trash to send him to college, and in that moment, my heart softened again. Even in pain, I wanted to believe. "Are you in trouble?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just looked down at the floor, his voice uncertain. "The investment business is tough. Camille is worried. If we can't turn it around, we'll lose everything." At the mention of her name, I felt my throat tighten. That woman's shadow had always hovered behind every wound of mine, from the suspicious looks, to the slap, to Michael's silence. "This house," I said slowly, "is all I have left." Michael suddenly slammed his hand on the table, making the paper and pen jump. His voice broke out like a shout. "Stop pretending, Mom. If you hadn't taken all my money, we wouldn't be in this mess. The whole city knows you're a thief, and now you still want to keep the house. Sign it. Sign it to make up for your sins." I froze, as if struck. "Michael, what are you saying? I never touched your money. I swear." "Don't swear," he cut me off, his eyes bloodshot. "Camille told me everything. It's all because of you." I trembled, tears rising, my voice breaking apart. "Don't you remember who raised you? You trust a stranger more than your own mother." He turned away, his shoulders stiff. "Sign it, so I can save everything." I looked at the paper, at my son's face so unfamiliar it chilled me. I took the pen. My hand trembled. Something inside me screamed, "Don't." But Michael's eyes no longer held the plea of a son, they were the eyes of someone giving an order, mixed with exhaustion and pride. I was too tired to argue. Too tired to fight my own son. "All right," I said softly. "If that's what you need." When the pen touched the paper, my heart felt as heavy as stone. I signed my name, Isabel Morris, in shaky letters that stretched like a scar. Michael let out a sigh of relief, took the paper, and left immediately without looking back. The door closed behind him. I sank into the chair, my hands still trembling, my head spinning. I didn't understand why, this time, the tears refused to fall. Perhaps because deep down, I already knew I had just given away something I would never get back. That afternoon, I turned on the old radio. The sound of bolero music came on, heavy and bitter. I looked around the house, the crumbling walls, the old dishes, the dim yellow light bulb, and told myself, maybe I really am stupid. But if my son needs it, why should I begrudge it? At night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of rain pattering on the roof mixed with the whisper in my head, that paper wasn't for borrowing, Isabel. It was for selling. It's gone. The next morning, I woke up with a dull headache. My old phone rang. An unknown number. "Mrs. Isabel, is that you? I'm calling from Riverside Notary Office. Thank you for completing the property transfer procedure yesterday. Your file has been submitted to the land department." I froze. Property transfer? The woman's voice remained calm. "Yes, the house on Maple Street now belongs to Mr. Michael Morris and his wife, Mrs. Camille Roberts. All procedures have been completed. Have a nice day." I heard the long tone, then silence. The room suddenly turned cold, dark. I sat still, my hands clenched, blood pounding in my temples. So that mortgage paper was a transfer paper. So, borrowing temporarily was just a trap. So it was my own hand that signed the sentence stripping me of myself. A wave of nausea rose. I buried my face in my arms, sobbing without strength to cry out. My cries echoed through the empty house like a voice calling from an abyss. At noon, a shiny car stopped right in front of the door. I heard the sound of heels hitting the tiles. Camille. She walked in like the owner, lips red, white blouse, perfume thick in the air. "Oh, you're still here, mother?" she asked, her voice sweet as syrup. I looked up, my eyes blurred with tears. "You, what have you done? This house. This house, she cut me off, smiling coldly, is ours now, mother. You already signed it. I stepped back, bumping into the chair. Michael said it was just a loan. Yes, loan, Camille shrugged. But in this life, mother, people borrow and never return all the time. You didn't read the paper, did you? Poor thing. The letters were so big, too. She took the document from her bag, opened it, and held it up. The black ink was clear, deed of property transfer. At the bottom was my signature, shaky, powerless. I couldn't breathe. Camille looked at me and gave a small smile, a smile that no longer hid anything. You know, Isabel, she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping like she was whispering a cruel secret, you really are a kind woman, to the point of being stupid. In the end, you lost everything. She turned and left, leaving behind the suffocating smell of perfume. The door slammed shut. I sat there, in the house that was no longer mine, hearing the wind slip through the cracks, hearing my heartbeat echo into emptiness. Everything spun. I had lost my son. Now, I had lost my home. But there was one thing they couldn't take, the only thing left in me, the truth. And I swore, with all the years that had been trampled, I would take it back. I sat motionless the whole afternoon. Light streamed through the old curtain, cutting into long stripes across the tiled floor. Camille's perfume still lingered thick and acrid like the smell of betrayal. Every breath made me nauseous. I didn't know how long I sat there until I heard a knock at the door. A familiar, husky voice called from outside. Isabel, it's me, Rose. I startled slightly. Rose, my old friend, the one I had worked with at the laundry factory for nearly 10 years. She was the only one who still called me with that familiar warmth, even though I had left the neighborhood long ago. The door opened, and Rose stood there, holding a bag of pastries and 2 paper cups of coffee. Her eyes widened for a moment when she saw my swollen face. Oh my God, Isabel, what happened? I couldn't hold it in, tears welled up again. We sat at the old table. I told her, bit by bit, from Michael's slap to the paper I foolishly signed. The story spilled out in broken pieces, like blood flowing from a wound that hadn't closed. Rose was silent, but as she listened, her face grew paler. When I finished, she only said softly, No, Isabel. You haven't lost everything. You still have me. That sentence made me burst into tears. Not because of pain, but because someone believed me. In that moment, I realized that as long as one person doesn't turn away, the world hasn't completely collapsed. Let me handle the checking, Rose said firmly. I have a nephew who works as an accountant at a bank. He can look at Michael's transaction history, see who's really spending the money in that house. I flinched. But Michael and Camille will find out. It's okay, Rose cut in. We'll be discreet. You've been silent for too long, Isabel. It's time you knew how they've been treating you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat watching the weak light from the alley, my heart racing, part fear, part hope. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark inside me, not of forgiveness, but of determination. 2 days later, Rose came back. She walked into the house holding a stack of printed papers. Look, she said, her voice lowered. I asked my nephew to trace some accounts under Michael's name. But the transactions go to a secondary card, named Camille Roberts. I took the paper, my eyes fixed on the lines of numbers, a series of large transactions: handbags, jewelry, luxury restaurants, spas, travel. All the money withdrawn from accounts that I knew Michael had never touched. Oh my God, I whispered, my hands trembling. She spent all his money. Rose nodded. Not only that. I found a mortgage at Southern Bank, under Michael's name, but the one handling it was Camille. She's in debt. A lot of debt. My head buzzed. So it had all been a game, and I, the foolish mother, was the first piece they discarded. You have to do something, Rose said quickly. If not, she'll sell this house too. But Michael, I stopped, swallowing hard. He won't believe it. He only listens to her. Rose looked at me for a long time. Then gather proof. I'll help you. I know a friend who's a lawyer. We'll do everything the right way. You can't just sit here and let them destroy your honor. I stayed silent. Those words echoed in my head like a bell. Honor. Yes, that was the only thing I had left. The next day, I began to write. Each day, each event, each word, each glance from Camille. I wrote everything down in an old notebook. The way she cried falsely, the way she accused me, the way she smiled when I signed the paper. Every detail, every second. Every evening, Rose came again, bringing new printed pages, bank statements, electronic receipts. She carefully marked them with a red pen. Here, look, this transaction is at the Silver Moon Boutique. Camille used Michael's secondary card to buy a $10,000 bracelet. The next day, it's a seaside hotel. They said it was a business trip, but look, only one signature, Camille's. I turned each page, tears streaming non-stop. Not because of pain but because of the truth. It couldn't save me, but it cleansed me. One afternoon, Rose asked. Are you going to tell Michael? I looked up. No. Not yet. If I tell him now, he'll just think I'm trying to break up his marriage. I need evidence that can't be denied. Rose nodded. Then we need more help. I'll talk to the lawyer. That night, after Rose had left, I sat alone in the dark kitchen. The wind tapped softly against the window frame. On the table was the stack of bank statements, still smelling of fresh ink. I placed my hand on them, a strange feeling rising in me, fear mixed with clarity. Outside, a dog barked in the distance, fading away. I looked up at the picture of my husband, his smile still gentle, still warm as ever. Do you see this? I whispered, I'm learning how to stand up. Late, but this time, I won't stay silent anymore. In the moldy old house, the small lamp cast my shadow long on the wall. And for the first time since being thrown out of my own home, I didn't feel weak anymore. I just felt clear. I knew the storm was still ahead. But I also knew I was no longer alone. And the one who had orchestrated everything to destroy me, would not sleep peacefully much longer. That morning, I was awakened by the sound of a car stopping in the alley. A shiny automobile parked right outside, white smoke puffing from the exhaust. I got up, my heart pounding, a bad feeling rising. The door burst open. Camille stepped out, wearing a tight dress, her heels hitting the ground in heavy thuds. Michael followed behind, his face tense. I hadn't said a word yet when Camille cried out loudly, her voice dripping with tears. Honey, I told you. I said we had to come here, to see if Mom's hiding my wallet. I froze. What wallet? Camille glanced around, then strode straight into the house like she owned it. She opened cupboards, threw aside blankets, pushed over the table, making a mess of everything. Michael stood near the door, avoiding my eyes. Then, as if on cue, Camille screamed. Here it is. Oh my God, here's my wallet. She pulled a black leather wallet out of the closet, the place where I never kept anything except a few old clothes. Her voice trembled perfectly. I searched everywhere, and it was here, right in Mom's house. I stood there, my heart stopping. No. Not me. I never. Michael rushed over, grabbed the wallet, opened it. Inside was cash and a few shopping receipts. He turned toward me, his eyes full of anger mixed with disappointment. Mom, how could you do this? I trembled, my voice choking. My son, I swear. I didn't take it. Someone. Camille cut in, leaning toward him, her tears falling right on cue. Don't be angry with her, honey. Maybe she needed money. She's old, she wasn't thinking straight. Those sweet but venomous words nearly took my breath away. I stepped back, my back hitting the wall. I didn't take it. I never touched your things. Michael spoke, his tone dry. Mom, I tried to believe you. But now, I can't anymore. I felt my legs weaken. Michael, look at me, do you really think I'd steal? Michael said softly, I don't want this to spread. Just admit it, and I'll find you a place to stay. Admit it? I burst out, my voice hoarse. You want me to confess to something I didn't do? You believe your wife that much? Camille chimed in, mocking, stop pretending. Everyone knows how poor you are, always so proud. Having money in your hands, what more could you want? I looked straight at her. You will pay for what you're doing. Camille smirked, arms crossed, pay. You have nothing left to lose, Isabel. I'm the one who has everything. Then she turned and pulled Michael along. Before leaving, he turned back, his voice breaking. Mom. I'm sorry, but I can't ignore this. The door closed. The sound was small, but inside me, it thundered. I sank to the floor, clutching the edge of my shirt. The pain in my chest swelled. I didn't know how long I sat there, until the light of the afternoon completely faded. When night fell, I stood up, went into my room, and locked the door. In the darkness, only the ticking of the clock and my heavy breathing remained. I remembered Rose's words, gather the evidence. Keep everything. I reached for my notebook and wrote down every detail, the time they came, how Camille found the wallet, the voices, the looks, every word Michael said. When I finished, my hands trembled, but my heart was steadier. I understood that the person behind today's theft didn't want money, she wanted to erase me from existence. Camille wanted me to lose everything, my honor, my trust, my dignity. But she didn't know that in this despair, I was becoming myself again, the woman who once raised a child alone, who had survived hunger and loneliness. I looked up at the ceiling and whispered. You can smear me today. But one day, the truth will speak for me. The night wind blew through the cracks in the door, carrying cold air. I shivered, but my eyes stayed open, clear. I knew, from that moment, Camille's game had begun. And I, the woman she thought would bow down, had just declared war through unyielding silence. That night, I didn't sleep. Rain drummed on the metal roof, each drop like a knock on my memory. I sat by the window, lights off, only the pale reflection of the storm outside glowing on my face. In my mind, Camille's words kept echoing, you have nothing left to lose. She was wrong. I still had my honor. And now, I had a purpose. Around midnight, when the wind began to die down, I heard faint footsteps outside the porch. A shadow stopped at the door. The old wooden door creaked softly. I held my breath, my heart pounding. A low voice hissed through the crack. If you dare to talk, I'll make you disappear. I froze. That voice, cold, sharp, dragging like a knife along my throat. I recognized it instantly, Camille. I didn't answer. I just sat still, listening as she walked away, her high heels fading into the rain. My hands shook, but not from fear. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was facing, someone willing to do anything to keep her power, even destroy an old woman. The next morning, when Rose came, I told her. She was stunned. She came here. I nodded. She threatened me. Said if I spoke out, I'd disappear. Rose was silent for a few seconds, then said firmly. Then we need proof. Not just to clear your name, but to protect your life. From that day on, we began to act. Rose brought a small tape recorder, old but still working. Hide it in your pocket or under the table, she said. If she comes, let it record. I nodded, though my hand trembled as I held the little device. I once thought only criminals needed things like that. Now I, a mother, had to use it to protect myself from my own daughter-in-law. The days that followed passed slowly, heavily. I tried to live normally, cooking, washing, going to the market. But inside, I was always alert. Every small sound made me flinch. Then one afternoon, while I was folding clothes, the familiar sound of a car came from the alley. I turned off the light, hid the recorder under the cloth on the table. The door opened. Camille walked in, no knock, no greeting, no pretending anymore. "Mrs. Isabel," she said, her voice light as air. "I came to remind you of something." I stood straight. "What is it?" She stepped slowly closer, her eyes glinting in the dark. "I know what you and those gossiping old women are doing, but it's useless. You must stay silent. No one will listen to an old thief. No one." I pressed my lips together. "And if I don't?" Camille tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Then I'll make everyone believe you've lost your mind. That you're delusional, that you're lying. A poor old woman, living alone, confused, who would believe you?" She bent down, whispering near my ear, her breath smelling of wine. "Or worse, just a small accident, you slip and fall down the stairs, who would ever know, right?" I looked straight into her eyes. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I felt empty. And in that emptiness, a small flame flared up. "I raised your husband," I said slowly. "I know how to look into people's eyes and see the truth. And in yours, Camille, I see only fear." She froze for a second, then laughed. "Fear? Why would I be afraid of you?" "Because you know I have nothing left to lose," I replied. "Someone like me is more dangerous than you think." The smile on Camille's lips flickered and disappeared. She straightened, looked at me for a few seconds, then turned and walked toward the door. "Before leaving," she said, "you'll regret this." The door closed. I exhaled hard, my heart pounding like a drum. I lifted the tablecloth and took out the recorder. The red light was still blinking. Every word she had just said had been recorded. That afternoon, Rose and I brought the device to meet the lawyer. A middle-aged man named Mitchell, firm, quiet, but with sharp eyes. Rose told the whole story, and I placed the recorder on the table. He listened without interruption until Camille's voice came through, "I'll make you disappear." When the recording ended, the room fell silent. Mitchell looked up at me. "Mrs. Isabel, you understand that what you have here is criminal evidence, don't you? This is no longer a family matter." I nodded, my voice soft but firm. "I understand. I just want the truth." He tilted his head slightly, a flicker of respect in his expression. "Then you must do one more thing. Record every transaction, receipt, and threat. I'll contact Chief Henderson, someone I trust. But you must be ready, because when the truth comes out, Michael will be dragged into it too." I clenched my hands. If that's the price to prove my innocence, I'll pay it. That night, when I came home, I sat on the porch. The sky was clear, the full moon lighting every tile in the yard. I looked up and saw my husband's face in my memory, faint under the moonlight. "My love," I whispered, "I'm doing the right thing, aren't I?" A soft breeze passed by. I felt as if someone had placed a hand on my shoulder. I wasn't trembling anymore. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of that day. "Camille thinks she's won. But I've begun to take back my voice through silence itself." When I closed the notebook, I realized, what kept me alive wasn't hope, but faith in the truth. And from that moment, I knew, the battle had turned. Camille might have money, might have power. But I had something she would never understand: the purity and patience of a betrayed mother. And those two things would be the blade that ended her lies. That morning, the first sunlight filtered through the trees, shining on the table where I sat writing the final lines in my evidence notebook. Outside, Rose was making coffee, its smell drifting softly through the old kitchen. No one spoke, but inside we both knew today would be the day of reckoning. I had just set down my pen when the sound of a car braking hard echoed from the alley. Dust rose beyond the window frame. Rose looked up, her voice startled but steady. "Isabel, they're here." I hadn't yet asked when the figures in police uniforms poured into the yard. The flashing blue and red lights from the patrol car flickered on the walls. At the end of the alley, Camille was standing, talking to a man in a suit. I recognized him as a real estate broker. She was smiling, her voice sweet as sugar. "All the paperwork's done, just need to sign the transfer contract." But before she could put pen to paper, 3 officers approached. "Mrs. Camille Roberts, we have a warrant to detain you for investigation of document forgery and property fraud." She froze, trying to regain composure, forcing a cold smile. "You're mistaken. I'm just here to finalize a sale. This is legally my husband's and my property." But Mitchell stepped forward, his voice calm. "No, Mrs. Roberts. This property belongs to Mrs. Isabel Morris, and we have clear evidence." Rose opened her bag, placing a thick, neatly clipped file on the table in the yard. All withdrawal records, bank statements, and camera footage. "Please take a look." A technician opened a laptop and inserted a memory card. On the screen appeared footage from Southern Bank's security camera, Camille in a white dress, wearing dark glasses, approaching the counter, smiling brightly. She signed papers, received a thick bundle of cash, and slipped it into her purse. The image was clear down to every movement. Another officer opened an envelope. "Here is the deed for the Maple Street house," he said. The ink on the word mortgage was erased and replaced with transfer of ownership. Signs of alteration have been verified by a handwriting expert. "And this?" He placed a fingerprint report on the table. "The signature fingerprint belongs to Mrs. Isabel. It matches a sample taken under coercion." The whole yard went silent. I saw Camille's face turn pale, her lips trembling, then suddenly she let out a dry laugh. "It was Michael. He told me to do it. I only followed my husband's instructions." Everyone turned. In the doorway, Michael had just stepped in. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He stopped in the middle of the yard, staring at the chaotic scene. Police, documents, his wife surrounded. What's going on here?" Camille broke free, rushing toward him. "Tell them. You told me to handle the papers. Now they're trying to arrest me." Michael stood frozen, turning to look at me. I said nothing, only stood there, my hands gripping my shirt tightly. Mitchell handed the second warrant to the chief officer. "Mr. Michael Morris," the officer read clearly, "you are under temporary detention for investigation of defamation, conspiracy, and coercion of an elderly person into signing fraudulent property documents." Michael staggered, his hands shaking. No, I didn't know she did this." But the officer's voice was calm and final. "All evidence proves you knew. And you remained silent while your wife continued the fraud." Camille screamed as the handcuffs tightened around her wrists. Her cry echoed through the morning, splitting the air. "I'm being set up. You filthy poor people dare." A female officer pulled her away, her words fading into the sound of the car engine. The police turned to me. "Mrs. Isabel, thank you for your cooperation. Your property will be returned once the legal process is completed." I nodded, my eyes burning but without tears. Michael collapsed to his knees. A choked sob escaped him like the shattering of glass. "Mother. I'm sorry." He looked at me, his eyes full of despair. I quietly stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've fallen, Michael," I said softly, "but at least now you know what you've broken." He lowered his head, his tears dripping onto my hand. Then 2 officers lifted him up and led him away. When the gate closed, I realized I was trembling. Not from fear, but from the silence after the storm. Before me, sunlight reflected off the table where the documents were neatly stacked. That light shimmered, clear as the breath of justice. Rose came closer, her voice tight but warm. "See, Isabel. The truth found its own way." I nodded slightly, my eyes following the fading trail of the cars. "Yes, but sometimes, to see the light, one must walk through a darkness longer than a lifetime." We stood there, in the sunlit yard, hearing the birds singing from the old trees. The storm had passed. I took a deep breath, feeling as if every breath had been returned to me after years of being stolen. I knew from today, I had regained everything. Not just the house, but my integrity, my honor, and the peace of my soul. And for a mother once doubted by her own child, that was the greatest victory in life. The morning of the trial, the sky was clear and bright as poured honey. The courthouse yard was crowded, reporters, neighbors, and even those who had once whispered about me. I sat in the front row, beside Rose and Lawyer Mitchell. The smell of damp wood and the scratching of pens mixed with the tense rhythm of breathing. After years of false accusations, everything was finally laid bare under the light of justice. Camille was brought in. She wore a white blouse, her hair neatly tied, her pale face covered with makeup. Her eyes still tried to hold on to pride, but behind them was panic. Michael followed, escorted separately. He was no longer the arrogant man he once was, only a weary figure, with hollow cheeks and trembling hands. When the judge struck the gavel, the courtroom fell silent. The reading of the charges echoed, each word heavy. The defendant, Camille Roberts, is charged with document forgery and the unlawful appropriation of property belonging to an elderly person, with a recommended sentence of 12 to 15 years in prison. The defendant, Michael Morris, is charged as an accomplice, with defamation and coercion of an elderly person to sign fraudulent property documents, with a recommended sentence of 8 years in prison. Camille burst into tears, trying to grab Michael's hand, but he pulled away. He no longer had the strength to speak, only bowed his head, awaiting the harsh judgment that he himself had caused. Lawyer Mitchell stood up, presenting each piece of evidence clearly: the bank camera footage, the forged deed, the forced fingerprints, and the withdrawal statements. Everything appeared cold, precise, leaving no room for lies. When the video played on the screen, the courtroom went silent. Only the faint hum of the projector could be heard, showing Camille withdrawing the money with the proud smile of someone who believed no one would ever find out. Rose sat beside me, squeezing my hand gently. I could feel her pulse strong and steady. A strange emotion rose inside me, not hatred, not joy, but the calm of someone who had walked through suffering to the end. When it was time for final statements, Michael stood. His voice was choked. "I'm sorry, Mother. I let greed and weakness blind me. I don't deserve forgiveness." I looked at him, my gaze softening. I said nothing, only nodded slightly. For me, his downfall was punishment enough. Finally, the judge pronounced the verdict. The court sentences the defendant, Camille Roberts, to 13 years in prison, and orders full restitution of both material and emotional damages to Mrs. Isabel Morris. The defendant, Michael Morris, is sentenced to 8 years in prison, with rehabilitation and prohibition from working in finance for 5 years after release. All misappropriated assets are to be returned to the plaintiff. The gavel struck. I closed my eyes. A tear fell, not from pain, but from relief. My honor had been restored. After the trial ended, everyone slowly left. I remained seated, hands on my lap, listening to the fading footsteps echoing down the cold hallway. The officers prepared to take the defendants away. Michael turned to the judge, his voice trembling. "Please, let me see my mother one last time." The judge nodded. He walked toward me, his hands cuffed, eyes red. I looked at my son, once my greatest pride, now only a broken figure crushed by remorse. "Mother. I know I was wrong." I exhaled softly, a strange peace filling me. "I forgive you, but I won't forget. Live rightly while you still have the chance." He lowered his head, tears falling onto the stone floor. The police signaled, and Michael was led away. I watched without crying. When the iron door closed, a shaft of sunlight slanted through the glass, warm and pure. For the first time after months of darkness, I felt light as if I had laid down the burden of a lifetime. I stepped out of the courtroom. The sunlight outside shone straight into my eyes, so bright it blurred my vision. The wind blew through the trees, carrying the scent of earth after rain, cool and clean. I stopped on the steps, lifted my head, and took a deep breath. No more accusations, no more suspicious eyes. Everything behind me had closed with the iron door. The burden of all those years melted from my shoulders. I hadn't defeated anyone, I had only reclaimed myself a poor woman, but pure. And for the first time after a long, endless road, I felt free. A few months later, when all the legal procedures were completed, I decided to sell the old house, the place that had once been a home, then turned into a battlefield of doubt and betrayal. Mitchell helped me with the paperwork. When I signed the transfer papers, I didn't cry, I only felt as if I had just set down a stone that had pressed on my chest for too long. That house had once been filled with laughter, then with tears, now, it was just an empty shell without a soul. I used the money from the sale to buy a small house by the sea where day and night meet in the sound of waves. The house was painted white, with a window facing the ocean. Every morning, sunlight poured through the thin curtains. Rose moved in with me, saying, "You need someone to make tea, and to be silent with you when the wind rises." I smiled and agreed. Life by the sea passed as gently as breathing. In the morning, I listened to the waves and smelled the salt in the air. In the afternoon, I sat and wrote my life story, not to hold grudges, but to tell that silence can sometimes be the weapon of the powerless. At night, I made a small pot of tea, listened to the old radio play bolero songs, and let the wind blow through my gray hair without feeling old anymore. That afternoon, the sea wind was stronger than usual. I walked down to the sand, watching the sun slowly sink into the water. The crimson light stretched across the sea like the shroud of a buried pain. Each wave that touched the shore felt like a lullaby lulling away injustice, sleepless nights, and days of humiliation. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. My chest felt light, as if it had finally opened after years of being locked. "Justice may come slowly," I whispered, "but it comes. They could take everything from me, money, home, trust, but no one can take the purity in my heart." A gust of wind swept through, playing with my silver hair, tasting faintly of salt. I suddenly felt small in the vastness of nature, but no longer afraid. Everything that once made me tremble now existed only in memory, like waves breaking and vanishing into foam. Behind me, Rose's voice called from the porch, "Isabel. Come in, it's getting dark." I turned back, smiling. "Just want to hear a little more of the waves. The sea is too gentle today." Rose smiled, leaning on the doorway, watching me. I stood there, alone between sand and wind, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The last light dissolved on the surface of the water, merging with the deep blue. I knew I was truly free. Free from injustice, from pain, from the fear that once imprisoned my soul. I was no longer the woman accused, struck, and cast out. I was Isabel, the one who had walked through hell to find heaven within her own heart. I said softly, as if to myself. "In the end, I lost nothing except illusions. And I have reclaimed what is most precious, honor and freedom." The lesson of the story is, trust is the most valuable asset in any relationship. Once betrayed, money can be regained, but trust cannot. Isabel was falsely accused, robbed of her home, and humiliated by her own son and daughter-in-law, yet she did not fall. Through patience and dignity, she proved that justice always stands with the innocent. From pain, she found herself again, understanding that forgiveness is not forgetting, but choosing peace. No one is truly rich after losing trust.